Well, the first thing, I tweeted this out a few days ago or the other day. I've had enough of January, if I'm being totally honest. I'm kind of ready to move on. But yes, President Trump, has been impeached for the second time, well over 232 votes in the U.S. House of Representatives, 10 of them coming from the Republican caucus, most importantly from Liz Cheney, daughter of obviously the vice president. Sends a strong message. Mitch McConnell has given every indication that he is through with Donald Trump. So now we just wait to see, when does Speaker Pelosi send the article of impeachment across to the Senate. But certainly a historic moment, something that we've never seen before. I mean, there's only been 4 impeachments ever in the history of the Republic. 2 of them go to Donald Trump. Well, yeah, possibly. As you already know, when the Senate receives any articles of impeachment, that's the only work that they can handle, is the impeachment trial. I suspect that we're not going to see this for 30, maybe even 60 days for several reasons. One, it keeps President Trump in check, make sure there's no bad behavior, make sure there is a smooth transfer of power. And as you point out, there's no need to impede the Biden administration because of all the silliness from the Trump administration, this latest insurrection. So I think you're not going to see it for 30, 60 days, if not 100 days. Why? Unless you get guaranteed, unless some deal between Schumer and McConnell comes together and says, hey, we're ready to do this, we can get this done in 5 days, who knows? I'm even reading today that there's reports that, who's going to defend the president? President Trump's having a hard time even putting together a legal team. So I don't know. Maybe it could be a quick, speedy impeachment trial, but I get the sense it's going to happen not until February. People are calling it the green zone, right? I mean, there are reports that there are actually more troops, more U.S. troops, more National Guard troops in the District of Columbia than in Afghanistan, which is unbelievable. If you look at a map of D.C., they've shut down the entire mall from the Lincoln Memorial all the way to the U.S. Capitol. 4 or 5 blocks around the White House, all of the Penn Avenue corridor has been shut down. It's a no-go zone. I mean, truly, which in some ways, is good. You're going to have protection, but you're really worried about these kind of second and third tier streets around there in case there's going to be skirmishes. But the political intensity, the violence that is possible, scary stuff. And, the Capitol is a small city. There's only 20, 30,000 people that work on the Hill. It's a small little community. In some ways, I was telling folks, this is like our 9/11 in the sense, like, we can't believe how disrespected one of the most important symbols of our country just been overrun by these insurgents. Yeah, in some ways, they'll be proud. The Biden people will be proud to say this is the smallest inauguration ever. Period. I'm just hoping that, obviously this is a tier one. I don't know. You might know the exact terminology, but the tier one national security event. The inauguration demands all kinds of attention and additional resources. I'm just hoping that all this kind of talk about insurgents, skirmishes, is really a signal from the U.S. government that is trying to push people away, tell them not to show up, let them know that we're watching them. I can't believe one of our most sacred, the transfer of power, the peaceful transfer of power, could be marred by domestic terrorism. It's just shocking and really sad, frankly. Yeah. Every day there seems to be more and more, certainly publicly traded companies that are distancing themselves, certainly from campaign contributions, the way they're engaged in the government relations process, from companies, frankly, shutting down operations. You've got Airbnb refunding folks, not allowing reservations to take place during the inauguration, to Facebook and Twitter kicking Donald J. Trump off their platforms, something we've never seen before. Obviously the business world doesn't want, they're in business. They don't really want to be dealing with these public affairs issues, but there's no way to escape it. The internal pressure from their employees to get out of this cycle of political nonsense, to also shareholders, corporate boardrooms. There's really no upside for a company to have to support some of these yahoos on Capitol Hill. So shutting down operations sounds like a smart move. Right. And as you point out, the First Amendment is about the government shutting down speech. It's not about a private business shutting down speech. A local bar has every right to throw a patron out if they want to. There's no, what Facebook has done is said, hey, we don't need you. We don't want you at our bar anymore. So this is, this idea that free speech is being impeded. No, that's not correct. Now, is it, could you make the debate? Should we be having these companies that have so much control that they can shut down? Parler was shut down in basically in 24 hours by Amazon Web Services. Is that a problem? Sure. But do they have the right to do it? Of course. So do we have to change the laws? Certainly we do. But the free speech thing, total nonsense. And, I think you're going to see more and more. Once again, you've got companies now have got internal pressure from their employees to be like, are you going to be a force for good? Is capitalism a force for good? Yes or no? We're excited to have Louise Schiavone join us today. She's super talented. She's been in DC for a number of years. She's a lecturer at Johns Hopkins Business School. She works for NPR. She's also a journalist. She's a TEDx speaker. She is working at the intersection of globalization, journalism, and business. So I think we're going to have a really good conversation with her. I'm looking forward to it. Where to begin? What a week. Pretty historic. I wanted to talk about in 2018, you had a TEDx speech, which was really kind of prescient. It was about civil communications. What has happened?
Right. I mean, I started my TEDx speech, and it's one of the core messages of my business communication lectures, with the concept that words matter, words count. How you say something matters. That communication isn't just me positing things and putting it out there and there's no reaction. It's a total circle. It's an ecological circle. And sort of like what the Beatles said, right? In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make, right? It's the exact same thing. That's what communication is. And we have seen that the violence of the communication, the crudeness of the communication, the sense that nothing is sacred, has really come back to color our society. And in my opinion, was a significant factor in what we saw at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
Is this as bad as the 60s? Is it worse? I mean, what is your sense in terms of like the political hostility, the intensity that we're seeing around the country?
Well, I mean, as a child of the, 60s and 70s, we saw in that period of time a lot of political assassinations, and so we don't have that level of real violent uncertainty, and I think that makes a difference. However, what's interesting is during that period of time, there were the issues of civil rights, which continue shockingly to still be an issue in our society and contribute to, a lot of the anger that people feel in this society. So what we do have now that we did not have then, in addition to the economic stress that we experienced during that period of time, what we do have now is this, this experience of the lockdown, the coronavirus, where people are stir crazy. People feel like they have lost opportunities. Anybody in business knows that there have been lost opportunities, from the big CEOs to people who are, out, just doing jobs that are not high profile jobs. Everybody's experienced a loss of opportunity. And what Donald Trump played to was this sense of being disenfranchised, having experienced a tremendous amount of loss, and having experienced a tremendous amount of loss because you were cheated, right?
Right.
And so his message was, look, you were cheated. How about me? I was cheated. Do you like me? And you voted for me? Then you were cheated. If I was cheated and you were cheated, then we've all been cheated. And that is the sort of a degree of, psychodrama that I don't think people saw in the 60s and 70s. And it is a new sort of horrible layer.
There's no doubt. And the communication, especially coming out of the White House in 1600, Pennsylvania Avenue, the language that certain members of the Republican Party are using is so heated. It's so hot. I'm just curious, do you think, as a communication professional, as a journalist yourself, do you find that this is intentional? Like they're just responding to events? Like, do you feel like there's a master plan here in terms of the communication that some Republicans are using?
Well, people are using the analogy to the Third Reich technique of the big lie, right? That I won in a landslide. He lost. He cheated. He stole it. And surely I really believe that this is completely deliberate. It is a deliberate strategy. Trump came into office as this big law and order guy, and he, you could count on him to reject the communist, socialist dictators of the world. But in the end, it seemed like, all he wanted to do was hold on to power and be in power forever, like Putin, like Xi, like Kim Jong-un. So, and I believe that there was an effort to use all of the, all of the tools that were available to him to try to sort of make that happen.
Yeah, it's really wild. I've been thinking about this because January 6th was one event, but I mean, he's been using this language for a year, if not longer. We even go back to Charlottesville and that event. But even as an American, it's been really tough to me to be like, did I actually see a coup d'etat attempted? Obviously, Biden's coming in office next week, and there's the famed 100 days. Is there an off-ramp? Is this a multi-year off-ramp? I mean, how do we get forward? How do we get out of this psychobabble?
Well, I thought it was interesting that with 10 Republicans in the House of Representatives, the impeachment of Trump, and Trump being impeached a second time, and the question now going to the U.S. Senate, and McConnell saying, "Look, we're not going to even talk about this until after Biden is inaugurated." What he was saying was basically this: we're not going to have any more drama. Everything better stay locked up tight. we're not going to incite any kind of vigorous debate is going to get people so ginned up that they'll come to Washington and do a repeat. And then Trump, with his statement last night, which, was like something that he should have said, not completely great, but way better than anything he has said in the past. See where he's thinking, what do I have to do to preserve my position as a former president? Because, as you know, if the Senate votes 67, gets 67 votes to convict Trump, he loses his Secret Service protection. He loses the perks of his office. And then the Senate is then asked to additionally vote on whether or not he would be barred from ever seeking office again. And that's like a second vote, right? But to lose the prestige of all of these perks that former presidents get, they have a former office and they get travel allowances and all this stuff. But then to be barred from ever seeking office again, which, like, if you get 67 senators to vote to convict, you are going to get a simple majority to vote that he should never be allowed to run again. So that Trump is looking at this like, well, I better. I mean, that really matters a lot to him. So that is like this precarious calm that we have until Biden is sworn in. And then the Senate take up of should he be convicted. And this is what I've been thinking, Mark. I've been thinking that if you get a change in the conversation, a change in the tone, a change in the way people interact with each other. If you don't have this constant drumbeat, leader of the free world being out there constantly slamming all of this crude, vulgar stuff that he's put out for the past 4 years, I think that can make it. And I don't think it's an immediate off ramp, but if you look at the experience that people are living right now, the incredibly horrible accumulation of body bags everywhere, but especially if you look at what's happening in Los Angeles with the coronavirus.
Yeah, horrible.
And this is something that Trump has said nothing about, but that Biden has been very keyed into. And so I think if he sets himself up as somebody who's saying, look, the main is that you've got to not die, right? That's sort of the end game with the coronavirus, is to not die. And second of all, to emerge from the economic destruction that the coronavirus has wrought. So today we saw another record number of people filing jobless claims. So this is a trend that is emerging, that as we get into 2021, it's going to be rough. Economically, it's going to be rough in terms of people's health. So these are things that I think Biden can do to change the conversation. One of the big ways that Trump went wrong was to assume, as the coronavirus was gaining momentum, was to say that the economy mattered more than people's health. Voters went out there and said, actually, no, we care about dying. And I think that if you have this change in tone, change in direction, change in priorities, that I think that I happen to be, I'm a hopeless optimist, a really pathological optimist, but I think that it can change. I think it will take a while, but I think it can change with a different kind of leadership, which I think Biden is.
What is being talked about in the C-suite, the boardrooms around America? Obviously, a lot of corporate America has said, hey, we're going to shut down political contributions to various campaigns. Obviously, it's no surprise with the reduction of presence of Trump on Twitter, Facebook, et cetera. What do you think is happening in terms of the C-suite, and what should CEOs, corporate communicators be thinking about?
Well, first of all, you have such a infusion of millennials into the C-suites, right, and into the work worlds. Of these young executives and the customers of these big companies have a set of values that are fresh, and what they are looking at is, what are you doing about climate change? What are you doing about health? Some of these Biden appointments, I think, are going to be really key. So, for instance, he appointed, I think this is amazing, a great climate, his strength in climate appointments, environment appointments is really terrific. Let's see how it works out. But right now, the signals are good. So, for instance, he appointed Deb Haaland, a congresswoman from New Mexico, to be the head of the Interior. She is a member of the Pueblo Laguna tribe. She and has authority over and tribal lands. So she knows the value of these lands. He's got Secretary of State John Kerry as a big point member of his team. I think that's going to be interesting because addressing the issue of climate change, addressing the issue of preserving the climate is a global challenge. And as someone who's been involved in sort of very global applications yourself, Mark, you see that all of our allies are really engaged in reversing the damage of climate change. So that is going to be huge. In terms of health, he's got someone from Mass General, Rochelle Walensky, who's going to step in as, she's confirmed as the head of the CDC. He's got Jeff Zients, who was of the transition team, and he's got a whole separate assignment, which is coronavirus coordinator. Biden has put point people in these positions. And then, very, very important is that as a really balanced team of people who really represent America, accomplished people from all races, from all ethnicities, he has a really well-balanced group of people who are stepping into these leadership positions. And that is going to be important also in the C-suites because, in the C-suites, they're hiring people who represent the diversity of America. And they're looking for their government to do the same thing. And without sounding too rah-rah, but it's such a difference from what Trump did. Biden has set up the mechanics to sort of make that happen.
I always found it just amazing how much the Trump team rejected working with business to make advancements. But there's obviously a new administration. Team Biden has got a new perspective, and certainly a lot of the folks that are coming in with Biden, as you mentioned, have prior experience, which is really exciting. I'm curious. I'm a huge consumer of media. I love the news. I wish I could still get the newspaper delivered to me. I'm that old. What's going on with journalism today? I mean, I don't want to say they're to blame for Trump. I mean, obviously you got to cover the president and you have to cover the leader of the free world, but something's not right. I mean, or am I just projecting, or don't I understand journalism?
So, I'm a graduate. I have a master's degree from the Columbia University School of Journalism.
Humble brag, a legit school.
Yes, right.
But seriously, not to be.
I have to say,
that's a great degree.
Yeah, I mean, and we had lectures from people like Fred Friendly and Mark Harrington, who is Walter Cronkite's executive producer, and lots and lots of established media professionals. And I can tell you that they would be horrified at the advocacy journalism that we see today, where if you tell a story straight, you are considered sort of a traitor. So like you say, well, look, this is what this person said, and this is what this person said. here's the context of this, here's the context of that, here's where it looks to be leading. End of story, right? If you tell a story straight like that, so many times people will say, oh, well, you don't care. You don't care about justice. No, I do, for instance, like I am one of those journalists who will tell a story straight. I do care about justice, but I feel like, my job is to tell you literally what's happening. Here is what's happening. Here's the context. Here's the meaning. And so, and then, I think cable news has a lot to do with it. And I worked at CNN for 10 years. And it is just a battle to keep the needle moving, right? To keep broadcasting and then to get, eyes on your network. And so there is a competition. And so people look for not just a broad audience, but for a deep audience, right? So they'd rather have an audience that's deep, that will always be there, will always be sitting on their couch watching you, as opposed to people who might drop in and watch you if there is, if OJ Simpson is, screaming down the highway in a white Bronco, right? So a lot of it has to do with the marketing of cable news. I have never been part of a news organization that said to me, these are the talking points. And when you get out there and tell the story, make sure you hit these talking points. I have fortunately never been part of a news organization like that, but I do believe that that's what happens at Fox. I don't know if it happens at CNN, but to me, it's so transparent at Fox. And so, but they're all on their own little, MSNBC, everybody has their own point of view, and that is not journalism, right? So it's a challenge. And I do believe that people have to get back to just saying, look, here are the stories, here are the facts. My favorite stories always were like to break down the economics of policy, right?
Right.
So you could say, like, here's the tax change. Here's how it would affect a family of four with an income of $75,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because you cannot argue with that, right? The facts are there. So I do think that we have to get back to our North Star as journalists, and that is to tell the truth without an agenda. Our one agenda has to be to tell the truth in a way that people can understand it. It has got to be clear. It's got to be something that people will grasp and people will understand what the consequences are. I mean, that's here again, what we saw at the U.S. Capitol is, people don't understand what the consequences of their actions are, the consequences of the news, the consequences of policy. And I think that is a responsibility of journalism to tell that story. And we need to get back to that.
Before you go, we both have a huge love for the Scottish Highlands. We both have a love for oysters. Would love for you to talk about what we can learn from the humble oyster as we are entering an age of hyper politics in America. What can we learn from
asking me this question? Because, as you know, I've done a lot of writing and a lot of film work about the oyster. And what I love about the oyster is that it takes its place in the ecosystem. It breathes in and breathes out. And by doing its job, it is constantly oxygenating the environment, making the environment better for, first of all, its little group of fellow oysters, and then all of the other members of the ecosystem that will thrive within an oyster reef, and clarifying our water to make the planet a better place to live. And that is just like one little oyster. And I love the story of the oyster because it is something that we can all do to assist in But it sort of has its own thing. It's sort of like a little creature that says, "Look, I've got this. Okay, can you just help me do this?" Okay, and this is what I love about the oyster. I mean, it is humble but mighty.
Well, I hope we can enjoy some oysters together face to face sometime in 2021 or
and whiskey.
Whiskey, and yeah, all the above. No, 100%. I think Louise covered a range of issues, from what's happening at the Columbia Journalism School to even the benefits of the humble oyster. So I thought it was a really good discussion. So I am going to go with Kirk Campbell. Joe Biden just named him to be the Asia czar for the new administration. Kirk Campbell is a longtime veteran foreign policy expert. He worked for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He has spent the last 8 years working on Asia policy. The reason why this is so important, the reason why this helps Joe Biden in his huddle is it sends a clear sign to our allies in the Pacific region, Australia, Japan, Korea, that we're committed to that part of the world. And also it's going to bring a whole of government approach to our Asia policy. That is, working with commerce, treasury, and defense. This is a really strong signal, really good person to have in the huddle. Absolutely fantastic. That's a great pick, great suggestion. I encourage everybody to check out that speech that the former governor of California made to all his fellow Americans. Brendan, thank you so much. This is The Huddle. This is once again focused on who you want in your huddle as we work through hyperpolitics in America. Thanks for joining us.